TLDR, new patch, substantial Nilfgaard changes, not much for other factions, massive soldier rework, Imperial Formation rework, new keyword, small Assimilate Shadow Nerf. Hey, what's up everybody, it's Lids, and we're back for some more Gwent, and today we're talking about the new patch notes release for tomorrow's 10.9 patch. It includes the most changes to a single faction that I can remember, because almost every single Nilfgaard soldier has been changed. In the past, Nilfgaard soldiers was a very weak archetype because they didn't have many synergies with other Nilfgaard archetypes and they weren't strong enough to stand on their own. For that reason, it's great to see them get some much needed attention. Now, there are so many changes to bronze Nilfgaard soldiers that I can't even fit them all into one video. So I'll give you a quick rundown of all the most important changes and how they might affect Nilfgaard players. Importantly, they now have much more cohesive synergies that fit more naturally with other archetypes. In general, there will be more damage, swarm, armor, and status support cards, many of which have abilities that trigger at the end of every turn. The turn-end abilities don't look very strong, but it seems like the defining feature of this archetype will be that there will be many ways to trigger the abilities extra times. This should make dedicated Nilfgaard soldier decks much more powerful and much easier to fit a few soldiers into other types of decks, which I think will be a welcome change. There were some particularly interesting changes that I wanted to be sure to highlight. Firstly, Imperial Formation has been changed. Now it'll boost 2 allied units by 1 and swap their positions, giving them each 1 armor if they're a soldier. And there are 4 charges. Each charge is fairly weak, but 4 charges is a ton. It looks unimpressive at first glance, but bronze soldiers now have more armor synergies, and the position swap ties into the new keyword. And that new keyword is flanking. That means that units on both ends of your melee row will trigger their flanking abilities twice at the end of your turn, whereas flanking units on both ends of your range row will gain 1 armor at the end of every turn. Many of the reworked bronzes have end-of-turn abilities that don't look that strong, but if they activate twice per turn, then they could add up quickly. You can only ever have 2 flanking units in each row, because there are only 2 spots on the end of each row, so your Imperial Formation charges help you move around your cards to activate whichever flanking ability is most helpful from turn to turn. It also means that if you're using Kahir, who has a very powerful ability when he's in the melee row, but becomes completely useless when he gets moved to the range row, with the new Imperial Formation, you can bump him back into the melee row to reactivate his ability. As for cards that have been changed, let's start with Albrecht and Affen because those are ones that previously were specifically designed to work with Imperial Formation, so they have been changed. Now, Affen supports Soldier Swarm, and Albrecht exists. Brigith, one of the only gold units with soldier synergies, is now less expensive and triggers the end-of-turn abilities of 2 bronze soldiers. Again, the individual soldier abilities aren't that strong, but you can trigger them more often. Now, one side effect of the bronze soldier changes that may have gone unnoticed was that in the past, 3 of the 6 bronze Assimilate units were soldiers. Now, all of those 3 bronze soldiers that used to have Assimilate, Ardfiend Heavy Cavalry, Ducal Guard, and Slave Hunter, have been reworked and no longer have Assimilate. Gold Assimilate units remain unchanged, but now there are no longer any 4 provision Assimilate units and less Assimilate engines in total, making it harder to fill out the bottom end of Assimilate decks. This probably reduces the provisions available in your average Assimilate deck by at least 2, so in most cases it's a small but potentially significant Assimilate nerf. Assimilate is, of course, quite popular, in large part because it's been so solid for so long, so I think this kind of shadow-ish nerf might have been one of the only ways to implement such a change, and although some people may not want to hear it, weakening Assimilate was probably justified. Other than that, some quick highlights of some of the unrelated gold card changes. Emir lost 3 base power, but now plays a bronze soldier or aristocrat on the same turn and costs 3 more provisions. His spy abilities remain unchanged. It's now harder to keep him on the board, so a little bit harder to sustain those spy abilities, but he has better tempo because that second unit that he plays is probably worth a lot more than the base power that he lost, and he can trigger both chapters of Masquerade Ball in 1 turn. Siphon Skellen no longer replays your most recent tactic. He now deals 2 damage for every 3 tactic cards in your starting deck. That means that you can't spam your favorite tactic card quite as much, but he gives you more pure damage and can trigger Assimilate more often as well. He now costs 2 more provisions. Tibor has 2 more base power, costs 4 more provisions, gained immunity, and rather than summoning a card from your opponent's deck, your opponent now draws a card. At the end of your turn, he will now infuse a random enemy unit, making it take 1 damage whenever it receives a status. Just remember that lock blocks infusions. He used to be a mill finisher, but now if you use him when your opponent has passed or when their hand is full, he damages himself down to 3 power, so you can no longer wait to play him until after your opponent has played all their cards. The infusion, though, could make him a very strong addition to Eternal Eclipse cultist decks to set up the Eternal Eclipse Initiate. On a totally different note, there are also now 2 new seasonal events with alternate rule sets. Between a Rock and a Hard Place from September 13th to September 20th, and Barely Balanced from September 27th to October 4th. We didn't get any details on those, but we focus primarily on seasonal events on this channel, so if you're curious about those new events or any other rotating weekly events, then stick around for lots of deck guide videos. And if I had to guess, I'd imagine Between a Rock and a Hard Place will give every unit flanking, and Barely Balanced will somehow involve cards transforming into bears, but we'll know for sure in a week. And alright, so there's more to this patch than just the things that we discussed, such as some other buffs and reworks that I couldn't squeeze into this video, but the cards that we discussed were the ones that I thought were the most significant changes worth highlighting. If you liked the video, then make sure to hit the like and subscribe button for more Gwent videos. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you next time.